Hi, my name is Jim and I was retired. Boy, what a terrible reading in the Consumer Price Index for May. The year-over-year rate of 8.6% is at a 40-year high, and the month-on-month 1% increase is heading back up again. Well, I'm going to try to find a silver lining in this terrible economic storm. So in this video, let's explore how high inflation might be good for your I bonds. Analysts had expected that inflation had peaked in March when it hit 8.5% year over year. And if you recall, in April, it dropped ever so slightly to 8.3%. And that's where analysts thought that the May number would come in flat with that. Instead, it was 8.6% year over year. But rather than dwell on that gloomy news, I'm going to explore what this might mean for our I bonds. Now, in order to do that, scroll down on this, skip the headline chart, and go down to this table here. So in this chart here, you're going to look at the unadjusted index. Now that 292.296 is the reading for May. And think of that as $292 for the basket of goods that a average urban worker would need. And that's 292 is up from 289 in April and 269 a year ago. So that's what fuels these unadjusted percent changes of an 8.6 year over year and unadjusted a 1.1% from these two numbers here. Then they seasonally adjust it, so they use a 1% for the seasonally adjusted. But let's take these numbers and go over to our spreadsheet. And I've shared this spreadsheet before, but here I am duplicating what I did prior for the last rate. And I'm starting in March tracking the inflation index, the CPI index, the month over month changes, and the 12-month changes for those. And over here, I've looked at the average March to September month-to-month change is a little over 1%. Now, I don't know really what the September number is going to be, but I'm going to estimate, and let me show you the formula here. I'm estimating a future value based on May's reading for 4 more months of that monthly inflation rate. And that's how I get a 304 up here. So if this is 304, which again is just this calculation here brought up here, then we're going to look at what the inflation factor might be from March to September if that were the number. And you'd be looking at an inflation factor of 5.844%. That would mean down here, with the fixed rate still at 0, if it stays at 0, you'd be looking at a composite rate of 11.69%. Again, if the trend for the last few months stayed the same, we're going to be looking at that kind of higher interest rate for our I bonds come November 1st. Another way to look at that is this is the difference between March and May, and it's only up 1.66%. Assume nothing else happened in these months here, and that was this. The March to September change was 1.66%. That's like the base case. That's the minimum. The minimum inflation factor here would give us a minimum composite rate of 3.33% when the new rate is set in November. Now, as a reminder, the TreasuryDirect's Series I bonds include a fixed rate, currently at 0, and then an inflation factor that changes for every 6 months of the bond. If you were to buy an I bond in June First, you get interest from June 1, but you'd be earning the 9.62% of the current I-bond rate for the next 6 months. And then in December, the new rate starts in November, but you're buying in June, so your new rate would apply in December. And at that rate, the minimum would be the 3.3%. 9%, 3.3. You're looking at a little bit over a close to 7% rate combined, or close to an 11% combined if the 9.62 actually goes up to the 11.69 as the next rate. Again, still too early to tell, but it allows us to start looking about what we will earn month to month on our I-bond. We'll know better in October when more of these readings are in the chart, and then we'll be able to truly estimate what the November rate will be. But for now, let's play games with what if high inflation sticks around? What does it mean to our I-bonds? This is what I had done last for a bond bought in April, and I had showed you this kind of spreadsheet. Here's a principal of $10,000, a fixed rate of 0, and for the current bonds that were purchased in April, before the rate changed, you're earning 7.12% for the next 6 months, and then we're getting that 9.62% the next 6 months. This is all guaranteed. We know this is going to work. So I put the factors here. This composite rate is a combination of these two, and I'll look at those formulas here. It's the fixed rate plus 2 times the inflation factor plus the fixed rate times the inflation factor. And that's the TreasuryDirect's formula for how you set the composite rate. So I've set the composite rate, and I had calculated in the past, here's how I estimate the monthly earning. And I had, let's look at edit formula. So in this calculation of interest payment, I use the composite rate divided by 12 to get me a monthly rate, and do that for 1 month. And the principal of 10,000 is entered with a minus, and it calculates roughly 59.33 with this I payment calculation. And that's what I had been using. So the interest rate calculation down here was a little bit different because you added in the interest you earned. That was semi-annually added to your principal. So let's look at that formula down here. And in this case, similar formula, but rather than just the principal, I also added the sum of the interest earned for that first 6 months, and then applied that to this new 9.62% composite rate for the 6 months. And that roughly added up to 83 a month. Again, if you try to look at the TreasuryDirect account, you'd see slightly different numbers here, but this was close enough for my calculations. But this shows you that if you bought in April, you were going to earn roughly $854 in interest, close to that 8.54% that I've shared. So that's approximately right. If you bought in June, it's similar calculations over here. Same calculations over here based on a 9.62. You're earning about $80 a month. And again, you're going to jump up to about $102 a month once you add the interest in to the calculations. But again, I can never get these numbers to exactly match what TreasuryDirect. So I kept looking. This is assuming that you have that 9.62, and then you're going to get that 11.69 6.9 for the next 6 months. And again, that's the best case scenario right now based on the data we have. But what would be the minimum? So let's go through and change this formula here. And instead, go back to that spreadsheet. Instead of using the best case scenario for the data, I'm going to move it over to the minimum. And you'll see you're going to earn about a little less than $30 of interest, a far cry from the $80 that you're earning for the first 6 months. And that might mean that if that's the case, you start winding down your I bonds after holding them about 16 months to ensure that you get all the interest entitled to you before the rates change. Again, you're going to surrender the last 3 months worth of interest when you do redeem your I bonds. So keep that calculation in mind. Of course, if the rate goes to 0 at some point and you're earning 0, giving up 3 months of 0 is probably okay. So this is where I was with the calculations, and you have a potential of earning a lot more if high inflation sticks around. If inflation starts to come down, then you're going to earn less in future 6-month periods of your I bond. And that'll be the calculation of when to start redeploying the assets by redeeming your I bonds and putting them in other investments. It really is too early to tell what the next 6 months of an I bond you buy today will earn. You can make some educated guess of a minimum and a maximum right now based on the data that we have. It'll be October before you really know what November 1's rate will be. I'll conclude with my standard warning. I am not a financial planner. I am not an MBA. So take these as entertaining ideas from one educated consumer to another. Always do your own due diligence and seek out a professional if you need one. See you next time.